Welcome back, and been looking forward to our next guest for quite some time. Roland Warren is his name. He's the president and CEO of CareNet and the author of The Alternative to Abortion. He is the graduate of Princeton University and the School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. He writes columns called The Just Saying, which we'll talk to him about that. And he's also the co-host of CareNet's podcast, CareCast, CareNet on family and faith in family. A lot going on there. There's the picture of the cover of his book, and his website is, and it's actually, it looks like Roland, but it's Roland, ROLAND Warren.com. And there's the picture of the landing page of his website. Roland, good to see you. How are you, friend?
Well, good to be with you. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate
it. Sorry we couldn't connect the other day, but we got that all worked out.
Yeah, good. Wonders of technology.
Good to see you. Tell us first about CareNet. What is it you guys do?
Well, CareNet's a ministry that was started in 1975 by Francis Schaeffer, C. Everett Koop, a theologian named Harold O.J. Brown, and Billy Graham was involved as well, and really focused on helping women and men facing pregnancy decisions and at risk for abortion, choose life, and not only life, but abundant life. And so we have a network of 1,200 plus pregnancy centers across the country, along with a robust national hotline for women and men who are at risk for abortion, and then a church initiative as well, where we try to move people from our network of pregnancy centers to the church for ongoing support and discipleship. So very comprehensive ministry. We recently integrated in another ministry called ICU Mobile, which has mobile medical units. So essentially they're pregnancy centers on wheels where we go into communities and we'll do ultrasounds and offer compassion, hope, and help to folks on the go. So we're very comprehensive in terms of what we do.
Oh, good. How's it going?
Good. Nobody's talking about abortion today. That issue hardly ever comes up. So it's kind of quiet. Not really. That's a joke, of course, to anybody who is following the issue.
How's it been since this Roe versus Wade shifted all this back to the states? I hear numbers of, I guess, the pill abortions going up, other abortions going down. What's your take?
Yeah, no, the abortion pill is now about 63% of abortions. So it's shifted dramatically from surgical abortions over the years, and I think that's probably going to grow in terms of that. And it really creates a certain intensity and sense of urgency for those who are at risk for abortion. It used to be that we used to say it takes about 9 days from the time the woman confirms her pregnancy till she schedules or plans her abortion or something like that. Now, I tell people it's like 9 inches. I mean, you can get the pills in the mail, and it's the distance from your fingertips to your mouth. So it really has created a tremendous sense of urgency of us to be able to meet those people, reach them at their point of need with the ministry approach that CareNet has. And certainly it's a challenge that we're up to, but obviously look for more support in order to make that happen. But it's definitely dramatically changed in terms of the landscape of the issue today.
Yeah, it's frightening. How come we're not hearing more about the post effect of the pill?
Yeah, it's really one of these things. It's really an inconvenient truth. I mean, there was a study that came out a couple of weeks ago that actually looked at some insurance data of women who had taken the first abortion pill and then had some serious adverse effects from the pill, and then sought medical care, and then obviously insurance to pay for that medical care. And what it found was over 900,000 women who had taken the pill, about 11%, a little more than 11% of them had a serious adverse reaction, and that was 22 times higher than what the drug maker says is supposed to be about 0.1%, and this happened to be 11%. So it's significantly more women having risk, and it's just one of these issues that the press and others don't want to talk about because it undermines a certain perspective that the abortion pill is problematic. But I always tell folks, look, there are issues with the abortion pill in terms of it hurting women, and that's an important issue. But the main problem with the abortion pill is that it kills children. So even though there's 11% of women that might be injured by it, which is significant and important, the fact of the matter is 100% of babies in the womb are affected by this, and they get death. So I think our reason for being against the abortion pill can't just be because it harms women. That's a secondary reason in my view. The first reason is that it kills children, and children are created in the image of God, and we certainly should be standing for that.
Well put. Well said. That's really, really well said. I've often said whatever God saves you from or brings you through, He usually turns you around and makes you a minister too, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
kind of your personal story with an unplanned pregnancy, right?
Yeah, it really is. I was a 20-year-old college student at Princeton, and I got my girlfriend pregnant. Now my wife of 43 years as of last week, and she was 19, I was 20. She was a sophomore, I was a junior, and we were doing stuff that Christians weren't supposed to be doing. We got pregnant, and when she went to student health services, the nurse administered the test and came back and said it's positive. Without taking an extra gulp of air, said, "Now, of course, you're going to have an abortion." And my wife said, "No, I don't want to have an abortion. I want to have my baby." The nurse kind of persists and says, "Well, gosh, how are you going to graduate from Princeton with a baby? What do you want to do when you graduate?" And Yvette says, "I want to become a doctor." And the nurse says, "My gosh, how are you going to become a doctor with a baby, graduate from Princeton with a baby?" Doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. Doesn't seem like it's a very wise choice. And Yvette came back to the dorm, I imagine, and we talked about it. And we said we're going to stick with the plan. So we did. We got married by a justice of the peace in Princeton. Had about 4 students there as witnesses, and we did that. We started our life together. She actually did graduate from Princeton, not with 1 baby, but with 2. Because Ivy League, you got to try to overachieve. So both of our sons were born at Princeton. She actually carried our second son in her graduation and went on to become a doctor. Has been practicing close to 30 years now. So that really helped me see this issue in a different way as I look back on it. I didn't know it at the time, but what I was really sort of living out was this whole perspective about being pro-abundant life. In contrast, or as an extension, if you will, of being pro-life, to really understand. And I kind of saw that in terms of the way that God had us handle this issue. And by God's grace, we moved forward, and the child that they wanted us to abort, he actually wouldn't end up going to Harvard. So it's kind of an interesting thing
Wow.
how that happened. And we have a granddaughter through that process. So I've seen the full circle of that decision. And I have this one picture I just love of my wife holding our granddaughter, first time that she was able to do that because of COVID. And the premise behind abortion is nothing good can come from this, that this child is a net negative for your life. Like nothing good can come from this. And when I look at this picture, I'm just reminded of the fact that when my wife was a 19-year-old sitting there with this news, that she couldn't see this picture of her holding our granddaughter, which was the result of the choice, that by God's grace she made. And from my perspective, she didn't see that picture, but God did. And that's really why it's so important for us not to try to make these decisions about who should live, who should not live, that kind of thing. These children are created in the image of God, and they are blessings, and they give blessings. And that's exactly what we've experienced in our life.
That's a beautiful story. Beautiful story. Let me take a quick break. Check out Roland's website. That's ROLAND, There's a picture of the landing page. And check out his book. By the way, where can they get the book, The Alternative to Abortion?
You can get it from Amazon. You absolutely can.
Okay, here it is. There's a picture of the cover. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and so honored to have with us Roland Warren. He's the president and CEO of CareNet and the author of a really great resource called The Alternative to Abortion. There's a picture of the cover of the book on the screen, available there on Amazon. He does have a website, Roland, and that's spelled ROLAND, cwarren.com, and there's a picture of the landing page. Roland, since Roe versus Wade, has the church disengaged from this issue?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. No, I don't think the church has, sort of disengaged in terms of, an interest in it. I mean, I think the challenge, candidly, is that the church has never been fully engaged in the issue from the perspective of viewing the issue through the lens of what Christians are called to do, which is make disciples. I think what's happened over time is because we gave the issue to the politics, the political process sort of dictates what's happened. So I tell people all the time that we basically exchange the pulpit for the podium. And really what there's a need of is exchanging the podium for the pulpit. Because, when we took the issue and made it more of a political issue, what we basically did was we lost the reason why, in my view, in many cases, we lost the reason why we were even pro-life to begin with. Like, here's what I mean by that. So if some people say that they're pro-life, and I always say, well, I don't know what you mean by that. Explain that to me, because somebody could be pro-life because they believe in Imago Dei, that children are created in the image of God, and the circumstances of a child's conception and birth should not determine its humanity and worth. And whether you're conceived in love or lust, planned, unplanned, have fetal abnormality, it doesn't matter. Your humanity is intact because it's linked to an immutable fact that you're created in the image of God. So that's a pro-life person. Then another person says, I'm pro-life and I'm for a 15-week ban. Okay, now 15-week ban, well, 96% of abortions happen before 15 weeks, according to the CDC. What about you? Well, I'm for a 20-week ban. Well, 99% of abortions happen before 20 weeks, according to the CDC data. So you can see what's happened is we allowed the political process to take an issue that is an absolute, that's a binary issue, and put it on a spectrum. So now what it means to be pro-life, it depends on what you mean by that. And that's because we took a process, a kind of an issue, and we gave it to the political process. And the political process, by its very nature, is about compromise. Two people come into a room that have convictions. I'm big lumber and you're an environmentalist. And we get together, we compromise a bit of our convictions in order to come to a agreement. Well, that's fine for certain types of things, but a child is not, can't be split that way. I mean, Solomon showed us that, right? That when you try to split the baby, what you end up with is injustice, a lack of righteousness, and a lack of mercy. So certain issues, the podium can't handle that. In other words, the political process should not be leading that. It should be involved, and it is, in terms of how laws are made, but the church should be leading, excuse me, should be leading on this issue. And so from my perspective, that's what I'm talking about in terms of the engagement of the church. And I think it's because we de-linked this issue from the basic call of the church, which is not just life, but abundant life, based on John 10:10, where Christ said, I came that you might have life and then have that life abundantly. What was Jesus talking about? He was talking about physical life, the Greek word bios, and he was also talking about spiritual life, zoe. In other words, he came that we might have heartbeats that are heaven bound. That's a narrative. I'm choking here, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a narrative of the pulpit, not a narrative of the podium.
Yeah, it's well said. I guess the reason I asked that question, President Trump on this last go-around to be reelected seemed to have softened his position on abortion significantly with the 15-week figure in there. And I'm wondering if that had a residual effect politically back through the Republican Party, number one. And number two is now that Roe versus Wade has taken the issue and pushed it back to the states, a lot of people don't understand at the moment that the state battle is to get abortion codified in their state constitution. So the issue has shifted from being a big national thing to being a state thing that most people are asleep on. I'm really concerned about it, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, you're accurate. When you look at what happened with the Republican platform in 2024, I mean, the pro-life plank of the Republican platform, if you really look at it from the perspective of the child, it's actually not pro-life. Here's why. We stripped out the child having a fundamental right to life, no longer in there, been in there from the beginning, if you will. We also stripped out fighting for a human life amendment, which is basically personhood. We left the 14th Amendment in there, but that's not really relevant unless you determine who a life is. In other words, you deserve life, if you will, and protection of the 14th Amendment. But if you take out what an actual life is or who's a life from the actual plank, it's just sort of like a fig leaf that's hanging in front of nothing.
Right.
And the only abortions that the Republican platform are against are late-term abortions, which are the abortions essentially that no one's having. And so, candidly, I think that, that doesn't bode well for the future, because that plank was part of a platform that won the popular vote, that won all the swing states, that won the Electoral College. And I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to add that back in future platforms. And so there is really a concern. And the other thing I would say in terms of the states issue, you'll hear people say, well, it's a states' rights issue, and kind of make that a pro-life statement. Whether it's decided by the states or at a federal level, that doesn't make it pro-life or non-pro-life. That just determines where it should be adjudicated. It's an issue of federalism, if you will. So there really is an issue there. And the last thing I would say, all of this, in my view, was what we've been seeing happen in the states in terms of the referendums. This is all knowable and seeable. One of the first things that I noticed when I started doing this work in 2013, I looked at Guttmacher's data at that time, and it said basically that 65% of women who had abortions professed to be either Catholic or Protestant. Now the data is about 54%. I think not because less Christians are having abortions, but because less people are calling themselves Christians. And my view from the beginning has been, if in fact the most durable voting bloc on the life issue, which people view should be Christians, are having abortions at a rate similar to the culture, if you overturn Roe and return it back to the states, they'll codify it in the states. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The margin of difference in votes, whether it's in Ohio or any place else where you've seen abortion up until birth with no exceptions, and particularly in red states, the difference there is pro-choice Christians, Christians who profess to be pro-choice. And once you lose the pews, you lose the polls. There's a connection between the two. So if you want to get the polls back, you got to get the pews. And if you want to get the pews, you got to have the pastors, because the pastors speak the message of life. And so since we've disconnected this issue from the fundamental reasons why we're Christians, if you will, we have an issue there that affects the political process. And if you want to change it, where do you go? You go back to the polls? No, you go to the pews. You go to the pews, and that's why I say the church has to lead on this issue in a very specific way.
Gosh, that's so well explained. I'm curious. You graduate from Princeton, University of Pennsylvania in business. How did God call you into doing what you're doing?
Yeah, kind of an interesting thing. Yeah, actually I was working at Goldman Sachs when I started with National Fatherhood Initiative.
Wow.
I'd grown up without my dad, and was on the board of National Fatherhood Initiative. And God, He uses things in your past. So I was struggling with that issue for much of my life. Became a father very early in life. And, He used me there to really kind of help see the fatherhood issue and its connection to the life issue. I mean, one of the things I tell people all the time that, when I was in college, for the first 5 months of my wife's pregnancy, there was only one person who knew she was pregnant other than her, and it was me. So the role of the father in this life issue is so critically important. That's been one of the other challenges that I've had for, quote, the pro-life movement, is that we've disconnected. Let me put it a better way. The most celebrated unplanned pregnancy in the human existence is the birth of Christ, right? Mary had an unplanned pregnancy from a human perspective, hopes for her life, dreams for her life that did not include a child at this time in this way. Angel comes to her and says, you will conceive and bear and conceive a child, conceive and bear a child rather. And what does Mary do? She says, let it be unto me as you have said, and she chooses life, right? And so what do you see in that narrative? What does God do to make sure that Mary's unplanned pregnancy is not a crisis pregnancy? He didn't give her a check and a baby daddy. He gave her a husband for her and a father for the child growing inside of her. And so God used my experience to help me see that what Mary was experiencing, not how she got pregnant, but the consequences afterwards, were very similar to what my wife was experiencing. And my wife, like Mary, made that choice. But let it be unto me, as you have said. But what did God do to make sure that Mary's unplanned pregnancy wasn't a crisis pregnancy? He sent an angel to Joseph. And Joseph had a plan, which was to divorce her quietly, to put her away quietly, because that's how you did an abortion back then. And the angel comes to him with a call to be a husband to her and a father to the child growing inside of her. And when Mary was at risk, Jesus was at risk from Herod, who did the angel go to? Went back to Joseph to provide and to protect. So my view is, and this is the difference between being pro-life and being pro-abundant life, is that you're not just focused on the sanctity of life. You need to be focused on the sanctity of marriage and family as God designed as well. That's the comprehensive way. And that first pillar of a pro-abundant life perspective is God's design for family. That's the very first piece. Again, that narrative is not the narrative of the podium. That's the narrative of the pulpit, because the pulpit has God's design for family that's anchored in the Word of God. And our marching orders for the life issue are actually in the first chapter of the first book of the New Testament. We should be building families, not just saving babies. And the better job we do building families, guess what? The more babies that we save. And that's why I say for the first 5 months of my wife's pregnancy, I was the only one who knew. Do you think I had any impact on that decision to abort? Of course I did. Of course I did. So that's, from my perspective, that's not what you're going to get from a political process. Only the Word of God gives you that. Only the Church of Jesus Christ has that mandate. So it's God's design for family, and then the second piece is God's call to discipleship, which we can talk about a bit more if you're interested.
Is your middle name Joseph?
Well, I tell people all the time. I call guys that when I meet them that stepped into the role, I call them. I say, "Man, you're Joseph." I call it the Joseph Project. That we're all called to step in that way. And look, here's the thing that people don't think about. Jesus could have come into the world via a single mother. I mean, scripture could have been written so that Jesus just came into the world via a single mother. I mean, clearly, God could protect Mary from a bunch of dudes with
Right, right, right,
songs,
right.
right? But he didn't. He brought Jesus into the world in a way that accomplished his purpose to bring a savior into the world without violating his design for family.
Right.
So Jesus came into a covenant relationship, a marriage that had not been consummated.
Roland, you're an inspiration. Let's stay connected. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out his website. RolandCWarren.com is the website, and certainly check out his book. Get a copy of it there on Amazon, The Alternative to Abortion. Check out his ministry there with CareNet as well. Thank you, friend. You're very inspiring. God bless you. Stay in it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate what you do, sir.
All right,
Take
see you
care.
later.
Bye-bye.